The Magic Tree House Fact Tracker Knights and Castles Chapter 4 Castle Life. A castle wasn't built just to protect people from their enemies. For the lord and lady of the manor, the castle was also home. A lord and lady usually married at a very, very young age. Most boys and girls from noble families were married by the time they were just 14 years old. Noble marriages were often arranged by the couple's parents, and sometimes the bride and groom didn't even meet each other until their wedding day. Once they were married, the lord and lady each had many duties. The lord was in charge of the whole manor. He was a general, police chief, and judge all rolled into one. He protected the people who lived on the manor. He also collected taxes from them. He settled arguments and punished criminals. The lady of the manor ran the castle household. She made sure all the servants did their jobs well. She took care of castle business when the lord was away. For fun, lords and ladies often went hunting together. Some also sang and played musical instruments. Many played the game of chess. Many lords and ladies kept falcons for hunting. The building where the falcons lived was called the Mews. The lord and lady's children were usually sent to live in other castles when they were about 7 years old. There they learned manners and school lessons. It was feared their parents would spoil them if they stayed at home. Hundreds of servants lived in a castle. Their job was to keep the lord and lady as comfortable, safe, and happy as possible. Some servants worked in the kitchen. They roasted meat and baked bread. Other servants washed clothes and swept floors. Special servants helped the lord and lady dress and bathe. It was considered a great honor to be chosen as a personal servant to the lord or lady. Lords and ladies often dressed in very fancy clothes. Ladies almost always wore long dresses. Married women were supposed to keep their hair covered at all times. A lady's headdress could be huge. Lords usually wore hose made of wool and shirts made of linen. They often wore tunics over their shirts. They sometimes even wore floppy hats with very long tails. A tunic is a loose-fitting piece of clothing usually worn over a shirt or a blouse. Shoes with pointed toes were also very popular. Some shoes were so long and pointed that they were twice as long as the wearer's feet. The lord and lady did not take baths very often. When they did, their servants filled a giant wooden tub with water heated over a fire. They used soap made from ashes and sheep's fat. The lord and lady slept in a big bed in the master bedroom of the castle. The bed was usually very fancy, with curtains all around it. When the lord visited other castles, he often took his bed and his bathtub with him. Beds were high in order to keep mice out. The Great Hall. The Great Hall was the biggest room in the castle. It was where the lord settled arguments among the people who lived on the manor. It was where he met with important visitors, and it was also where the lord's family, his knights, and his guests ate their meals. At meal times, the hall was lit by candles and torches. There was often a huge fire blazing at one end of the hall. At the other end of the hall was the high table. The high table was set up on a platform. It was where the lord and lady ate their meals. Their food was served on plates made of pewter or silver or gold. Pewter is a metal made of tin mixed with copper and lead. Everyone else sat on benches or stools at long wooden tables. There were no plates for them. Their meals were served on thick slices of stale bread. The bread slices were called trenchers. When the trenchers got too soggy to hold meat, they were given to beggars outside the castle. Table manners were a little different than they are today. There were no forks, so it was all right for people to eat with their fingers. Several people might drink from the same cup. They could throw their scraps on the floor, and it was even okay to spit on the floor. By the end of a meal, the floor of the Great Hall was really dirty. It was covered with scraps of food, bones, and even droppings from animals. Servants sometimes spread flowers and dried weeds on the floor to cover the bad smells. On holidays and other special occasions, the castle had celebrations called feasts. On feast days, the great hall was filled with music. Singers and musicians performed while the guests ate. Jugglers and jesters also entertained the crowds. A jester was a medieval clown. Cooks worked night and day preparing fancy dishes for a feast. They might roast peacocks and serve them with all their feathers. They might serve a swan with its beak painted gold. Sometimes a cook would put live birds inside a pie, and when the pie was cut open, the birds would fly out. Turn the page to attend a medieval feast.